The last thing I remember is the cold. Not a gentle winter chill, but a deep, invasive cold that seeped into my bones and silenced the frantic beating of my own heart. A doctor's face, blurry and compassionate, floated above me. "We'll see you in the future, Maya," he said. The world, already fading from a degenerative nerve disease, dissolved into a final, dreamless black. My family had scraped together a fortune for this last, desperate hope: cryopreservation at the Elysian Fields facility. A long sleep, they called it. A promise of a second chance in a future where my illness could be cured. Then there was awareness. It wasn't a waking in the traditional sense. There was no flutter of eyelids, no gasp for air. It was a slow bloom of consciousness in a void. I had no body, no weight, no sense of touch or smell. I was just a point of view, a thought. I was tethered to something. I could feel that much, a deep gravitational pull towards a single point in space. I focused on that point, and the world resolved around me. I was in a vast, sterile white room. The silence was absolute, broken only by a low, almost subsonic hum. Arranged in perfect, silent rows were dozens of colossal cylindrical metal tanks like futuristic sarcophagi. They were cryogenic diwars, and I was looking at them from a vantage point near the ceiling. I drifted, a disembodied eye, and found the diwar I was anchored to. A small plaque on its side read, "Maya Flores, patient number 217, preserved 2025. Below me, I could see my own body suspended in the icy vapor, my face peaceful in its frozen slumber. I was a ghost, haunting my own corpse. Time became meaningless. There was no day or night in this windowless tomb, only the constant, unchanging hum and the cold, clinical light. My only marker of passing time was the technician. Once every cycle, a figure in a white clean suit would enter, their movements slow and deliberate. They would check vitals on a floating console, their breath misting in the frigid air. They never looked up. They never spoke. They were just part of the machinery. At first, my consciousness was a chaotic storm of memory and fear. I relived my life, my sickness, my final goodbyes. But after countless cycles of the silent technician, the memories began to feel thin, like faded photographs. The panic subsided, replaced with a profound, soul-crushing boredom. I was a prisoner in a silent, timeless eternity. I screamed, but I had no mouth. I wept, but I had no eyes. I was utterly, completely alone. That's what I believed for the longest time. The first contact was not a sound, but a feeling, a flicker of emotion that wasn't my own, a sharp spike of raw, undiluted panic from somewhere across the room. I focused my awareness, pushing it past my own diwar, and I found another, a man, recently preserved. His consciousness was a whirlwind of confusion, a raw nerve ending. I could feel his final memories, a car crash, the wail of sirens. Then I felt others, dozens of them, a silent chorus of minds, each one anchored to their frozen shell. We were a city of the silent dead. Most were faint, lost in dream loops, reliving their favorite memories or their worst traumas over and over. A woman forever dancing at her wedding. a soldier perpetually charging a long-forgotten battlefield.
A few, like me, were lucid, aware. We learned to communicate, not with words, but by projecting pure thought, flashes of memory and emotion. A young man named Sam, #189, who had succumbed to cancer. An elderly woman, Beatrice, #94, who had simply wanted to see the 22nd century. We formed a small, silent community, a support group for the disembodied. We shared our stories, our fading memories, to remind ourselves that we had once been real. It was Beatrice who warned me about patient number 7. "He's different," she projected, her thought laced with a feeling of cold dread. "He's been awake the longest. He's forgotten who he was. Now he's just a hunger." Patient number 7 was one of the facility's founders, preserved in the early 90s. He was the old man, as Beatrice called him. Over the silent decades, his consciousness had warped, shed its humanity, and become something predatory. He couldn't harm us physically, but he could feed. He would drift towards the newer, weaker minds, the ones lost in their dream loops, and slowly, delicately, peel away their memories. He consumed their experiences, leaving them as hollow, faded echoes, their consciousness dissolving back into the void. He did it to stay sane, to feel something, anything, other than the endless, silent cold. I began to feel his presence. A cold, intrusive probe at the edges of my own mind. It felt like someone trying to read my private diary, my most precious memories, my first kiss, the smell of my mother's baking, the feel of the sun on my skin, would suddenly feel distant, blurry, as if they belonged to someone else. The old man was tasting my life, and I was terrified that soon there would be nothing left of me but the cold. Our silent eternity was shattered by an alarm. A real, audible alarm that blared through the facility. A violent intrusion into our silent world. Red lights flashed, casting hellish shadows on our frozen tombs. The technicians were running now, their faces panicked. Through the facility's comms, we could hear their frantic shouts. "The blizzard knocked out the primary grid. Backup generators are failing. Core temperature is rising." The thaw. For the lucid among us, the thought was both a prayer and a curse. Release or oblivion. As the machinery groaned and the temperature in the room began to climb, the hum that held us tethered to our bodies began to fluctuate. Our ethereal chains were weakening. The old man saw his chance. Freed from his usual constraints, his consciousness surged through the room like a tidal wave of psychic static. He wasn't just tasting memories now, he was ripping them away in his panic. I felt Sam's consciousness flare with terror and then fade to nothing. Beatrice's presence, once a warm comfort, dissolved into a faint, confused whimper. He came for me next. A crushing mental weight pressed in on me, suffocating me. I felt my memories being pulled, stretched, torn. My mother's face, my first pet, the sound of my own laughter. I fought back, clinging to the core of who I was, focusing on a single, powerful memory, the feeling of my father's hand holding mine as I was wheeled into the operating room. I am Maya Flores. I am real. It was a psychic war in a room of silent, frozen bodies. Outside our silent battle, the physical world was descending into chaos. I could see the frost on my own diwar beginning to melt. A crack appeared on the glass of patient number 42. The technicians were trying to manually stabilize the core, their shouts becoming more desperate.
The old man's psychic assault was relentless. He was stronger, ancient in his silent madness. I was losing. My sense of self was unraveling. Just as my last memory began to fade, a massive electrical surge erupted from the central power conduit. The lights exploded, the alarm screamed and then died. The entire facility was plunged into absolute darkness and silence. When the emergency lights flickered back on a moment later, the psychic pressure was gone. The old man's consciousness had vanished, dispersed or destroyed by the raw energy of the system failure. The remaining technicians had stabilized the system. The temperature was dropping again. The long sleep would continue. But something had changed. I felt my connection, my anchor to the body of Maya Flores, snap. The gravitational pull was gone. I was adrift. I floated, free and untethered, through the cold metal wall of my own tomb. I drifted through the corridors of Elysian Fields, a silent observer. I passed through the exterior wall and out into the world. The blizzard had stopped. The world was covered in a pristine blanket of white snow, sparkling under a full moon. I felt no cold. I felt nothing. I saw a car pull up to the facility's main gate. A man and a woman got out. My parents. They were older now, their faces etched with a grief that time had not healed. They walked to the small memorial garden and placed a single white rose at the base of a plaque. My plaque. I drifted towards them until I was standing right beside them. My mother was weeping silently. My father put his arm around her. I screamed their names, but I had no voice. I reached out to touch them, but I had no hands. They stood there, mourning the frozen girl in the tank, completely unaware that their daughter was right there, closer than she had ever been, and more impossibly far away. I had escaped my prison, only to find myself in a larger, lonelier one. I was cured of death, but I was not alive. And I would watch the world turn, a silent, unseen echo, forever.